Welcome everyone to this webinar today. My name is Stian and I work for Mnemonic and I will be your host for today. We have a very interesting agenda lined up, and this is a theme that you will see more of going further out in 2021. And today we will be learning about one of the most talked about security incidents which have had a huge impact here in the US. I'm talking about the SolarWinds incident. And we would like to start by thanking everyone at Mnemonic who made this webinar possible. And we would especially like to recognize you, the audience, wherever you're calling in from. Thank you so much. We hope you're safe and we appreciate every one of you. This webinar covers a lot of time zones, and there is a lot of video calls and webinars. So we will strive to keep time. So just to get everyone aware of who Mnemonic is, so we were founded in the year 2000, and Mnemonic is a globally growing pure play cybersecurity company with over 20 years of experience and over 250 employees. Recognized as a notable vendor 5 years in a row by Gartner, our flagship service and platform Argus, by and for security analysts, is a vendor agnostic managed detection and response service with a proven accuracy of over 98%. This gives you time to focus on the real and more meaningful challenges at several times the lower cost than standing up something like this yourself. Shoot me an email and I can share with you the business case of build versus buy. Okay, with that, I would like to introduce the presenter today. My friend and colleague, Dr. Maria Mo, is a research scientist working with threat intelligence and incident response at Mnemonic. Maria has a PhD in information security and is also an associate professor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So with that, welcome, Maria. The stage is yours.
Okay, so thanks for the introduction. My name is Maria Mo, as Stian said. I work with the Mnemonic's threat intelligence team, and today I have the honor of giving this webinar, which will give you some key takeaways from the SolarWinds incident. I'm currently with the UK office of Mnemonic, so I'm presenting today from my home office in London. This is the agenda that we'll go through during this presentation. First, I'll give a brief overview of what actually happened during the SolarWinds incident. I'll talk about the threat actor and their TTPs, how they did the attack. I'll talk about incident response, how we at Mnemonic helped our customers. I'll talk about how this impacts the general threat landscape, and I'll finish off with some lessons learned, and I will also set aside some time for a Q&A session. So as Stian explained, you can use the Q&A box feature in the WebEx platform if you have any questions during my talk. And then Stian will collect these questions and give them over to me at the end of my presentation. And hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions. So let's get started. So what happened? As I'm sure most of you are aware of, the news broke when FireEye revealed that they had been a victim of a larger software supply compromise via the SolarWinds Orion platform. And soon more and more victims were revealed. Out of the victims, 80% were actually located in the US. It turned out that around or up to, we don't know the exact figure, but the figure 18,000 has been mentioned. So up to 18,000 SolarWinds customers had installed the Trojanized software update. But luckily, maybe, is that only a small subset of these were actually targeted with the second stage payloads and became really compromised through the installed backdoor. So just to give you a quick overview of the timeline here, I mean, there were plenty of victims. We don't know all the victims. Microsoft has said that they identified more than 40 of its customers that installed the Trojanized versions and were also served the additional second stage payloads. And I'm sure you see in the media, lots of different organizations were compromised in this incident, and were sort of maybe forced to go publicly with this because information were revealed in the aftermath about who were on the target list. I'll come back to that. So first, the timeline. So it turned out that this is the supply chain breach had gone back pretty far back in time, so more than a year before it was publicly disclosed. So it was disclosed, if you start at the end of the timeline, the 13th of December, end of last year. And in their investigation, SolarWinds hired several firms that helped them with their investigation. And this timeline is adapted from a blog post about their findings in their forensics investigation. So they saw that there were signs of intruder activity as far back as in September 2019. That's the first sign they found of the threat actor accessing SolarWinds' internal systems. So the threat actor was inside. They were able to inject their code into the software development process of SolarWinds. So they started already in September 2019 with testing if they were, through their sophisticated methods, through the malware, able to insert their code. So they tested this, and they also could then see that their code injects were to be found in the software updates, the releases that SolarWinds offer to the customers. And from their forensics investigation, they found that the threat actor in November stopped injecting the test code and probably were then preparing for the real attack, which was the Sunburst malware. And the compilation time and the deploy time of the Sunburst malware was in February 2020, so more than a year ago. And following this, the Sunburst malware was distributed to the victims, the SolarWinds customers, through their regular software update process. So the code was hiding in plain sight. It was, signed. It looked legitimate, and I mean, there's not much you can do to protect yourself against installing or getting compromised through that kind of supply chain compromise, because you have to trust the software update that come from your vendors, the vendors that you have a trust relationship with. So it turned out that the threat actor was distributing this from February, March, April, and then removed the malware in June 2020. So there was a few months there where first the backdoor was distributed through the software updates, and then the start of the second stage, the hands-on keyboard attacks started sometime in May 2020. And these hands-on keyboard attacks actually continued all through the fall of 2020 until it was publicly disclosed, and a cat was out of the bag in December. So this is a highly sophisticated attack. It's complex malware designed to circumvent threat detection. There was a particular piece of malware called Sunspot, which CrowdStrike analyzed. And I want to just refer you to CrowdStrike's excellent analysis of that if you want all the details of how Sunspot worked. That malware was used to actually hijack the processes in their code development. It involved, which is involved in the compilation of code, and they replaced one of the source files with their malicious source file containing the Sunburst backdoor using this Sunspot malware. And it was highly sophisticated, highly stealthy. There were some extra safeguards put in place to ensure that in case those software builds failed in the compilation, some of the error messages were suppressed, making it less likely that the SolarWinds developer actually detected the injected code in the software update packages. And then after this widespread backdoor installation campaign, the threat actor then started carrying out their highly targeted campaign, where only a select few of the victims updated with further malware and in form of some loaders that have been analyzed both by FireEye and Symantec. One version of these loaders for the second stage malware was called Teardrop by FireEye, and there's another variant called Raindrop that was analyzed by Symantec. And yeah, this operation of how the threat actor then installed this in the second stage malware in a very stealthy operation has also been further described by Microsoft, which was also one of the victims of the attack, it turned out. So who was behind this? There was a lot of rumors in the start about who was behind this. FireEye did not want to name the threat actor. They said they had not sufficient evidence to pinpoint it to a specific threat actor, so they have put it in their uncategorized category, which and giving it the name UNC2452. Volexity wrote a blog post where they said they had been tracking this threat actor for a while, and they had given the threat actor the name Dark Halo. Later, there came a blog post by Kaspersky, which did a very good technical analysis of the malware and found the similarities with a previously seen malware called Kasuar, which was previously linked, I don't think by Kaspersky, but by others to the threat actor named Turla, which then also has been associated with Russian intelligence. And then finally, the US FBI, CISA, the ODNI, Office of the National Intelligence in the US, and the NSA came out with a joint statement where they said that this SolarWinds incident was the threat actor that was behind it was an APT of Russian origin, and this was part of an ongoing intelligence gathering campaign. And then there were some media reports pinpointing this to the APT-29 threat actors, which is a name for the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR. I don't know if I would say high confidence on those media reports. It's still not totally clear exactly which APT threat actor from Russia that this is related to. And I also heard the name Holiday Bear for this campaign because it was, of course, something that disrupted the Christmas holiday for a lot of security people.
Maria, do you mind me asking a question? I'm thinking this obviously caught a lot of attention both in the cybersecurity space and also in the broader space of the media. Was there anything? I mean, it seems like the level of information sharing and the willingness to be open about this from the companies. I'm not sure if you're going to talk about that maybe later, so maybe I'm jumping the gun here. But is there a change, or is there something new there, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think that over the years, there's been more and more openness around APT incidents, and this certainly has. I really want to say thank you to those victims of this attack, especially FireEye, Microsoft. They're really sharing a lot of details about their incident response, tools, techniques, procedures that the threat actors used, and some really valuable information for us as defenders. So I think this is a great example of an incident where everyone has a lot to learn from it, and I'm sure this is going to be a topic of many webinars, and I mean, come on, also be part of conferences and on the syllabus for my students in the coming years. So this is a really great incident for learning, and And if you look at all the information that has been shared, I mean, at first it was like bits of information here and there, and then it all came together, and now we have a pretty good picture of what was going on. So I think that's really commendable. So who were on the target list? It's also very interesting in this campaign that it was essentially an information gathering espionage campaign. So we now know more about who was the victims, which also says a lot about the targeting and some things about the intention of the threat actor. So I would like to group the targets into two different types of targets. So the first is software and IT security firms that seem to have maybe been a target as a means to get to the real target that the threat actor, where the threat actor wanted to collect information. So SolarWinds was one of the software firms that were targeted and breached. It turned out it was also Microsoft was also a victim in this case, and it was interesting to see that that the threat actor was by gaining foothold at Microsoft, they were able to read the code repositories of the technologies that were then later on exploited in order to get into the other targets. So it seems to be a way of getting the information they need to get to their end of their objectives of the campaign. FireEye also on the list, of course, and then there were a bunch of other vendors that either confirmed themselves that they had been targeted. Some of them had successfully spotted, detected, and stopped the intrusions, and some of them were further compromised. But on this list, Cisco, Palo Alto, Qualys, Fidelis, Mimecast, I'm not going to go through the whole list. A lot of these were actually sort of outed by the way the threat actor had set up the command and control infrastructure using DNS queries. And once this information came out, all of the security community, of course, started analyzing these DNS queries, looking into their passive DNS collection, finding DNS traffic that could tie this to the domain that was found to be hosting the command and control infrastructure. And this domain was, of course, also later sinkholed as part of the remediation cleanup of this campaign. I would like to particularly commend NetResec that has done a really good job in collecting all the information about how the security community came together and looked at all these DNS requests, and they even made a decoder, a tool that you can use to decode this command and control traffic. It wasn't very sophisticated. It was just encoded with a base 32 encoding using a custom alphabet. But yeah, this gave information about who were, first of all, who were in stage 1, which was a lot of organization that had installed the Trojanized software update and got the backdoor. But then, interestingly, there was a flag that was set in the command and control traffic, the DNS queries, that would say if the target had moved on to the second stage and got further compromised. So if you look at this tweet, there is a state diagram showing which stage you are on, depending on what kind of DNS queries you observe. And I'm not going to go into all of these details. I would just refer you all to NetResec's excellent blog on this if you want to know all the details. But basically, it was this stage 2 flag that also identified the victim. So first, the victim gets the Trojanized backdoor. information starts getting collected from the internal, like which security tools are installed. Also, Active Directory information gets exfiltrated, and this is then sent through this command and control channel. Then the threat actor makes a decision: is this interesting target for us? Is this on the target list? And most of them are not. I think it was like less than 99% of all the victims that got installed the backdoor was further compromised. But if they were so unlucky to be on the target list, then you will get the manual, the stage 2 and the manual hands-on keyboard hacking operation. So the actual target that seemed to be, at least if we couple this with the information that this is an espionage campaign, and also some of these were also mentioned in the media, were in US government. So US government institutions, US government contractors, so the US Treasury Department, the NTIA, Department of Health, National Institute of Health, CISA and DHS, US Department of State, US Department of Energy, and also some US states were on this list of US targets. So this means that this fits really well into the threat actor intentions of collecting information and this being part of a larger espionage campaign. So how did they do it? It was not only the SolarWinds supply chain compromise that was used for initial access. It was used for initial access in some cases, but reports came out that there were other intrusion vectors as well. So it's not only about SolarWinds. It's actually more about getting into first using either the supply chain compromise or other techniques such as password spraying, which is a technique we've seen a lot of the last year, brute force logging attacks where the threat actor just uses lots of different passwords that are popular, passwords that have been leaked, the so-called credential stuffing. There are different techniques that we've seen a big increase in over the last year. So this is also an intrusion vector. And then there's also other intrusion vectors that we haven't heard public reports about yet. But what's very interesting, I think, in this context is that the threat actor seems to be specialized on, or as soon as they got their initial access, they very soon wanted to get a foothold in the cloud environment. So they moved from the on-premise initial access into cloud environment access, and using some really specific techniques for lateral movement from on-premise to then particularly Microsoft's Azure cloud environment. And by looking into the techniques that they used, we can also learn a lot about how to do our cloud security better, how to actually be able to protect against such an advanced, sophisticated attacker. So first of all, it's I think maybe the first, but maybe not the first, but at least the biggest and the most written about example of practical golden SAML attack. So in short, golden SAML attack, it's nothing new. It was described already in 2017. It's an attack where the threat actor gains access to an on-premise Active Directory Federation services server by stealing a token signing certificate and using this to forge token for arbitrary users. So this is a technique that allows threat actor to bypass the normal authentication methods, such as passwords and multi-factor authentication. And in order to get hold of this token signing certificate, so they need a certificate, and the threat actor needs the private key belonging to this token signing certificate. The threat actor simply needs to have access to the Active Directory FS Federation Services account. And if this account is compromised, then the threat actor can export this private key using different types of methods. You can use like a tool like Mimikat to dump credentials. So FireEye reported in their investigation that they had seen a threat actor use several different techniques to steal this private key belonging to this token signing certificate. They've seen the threat actor stealing the backup files for the database, querying the database via PowerShell, and also querying the database using custom executable script. So as I said, this is nothing new. It was already described back in 2017 by CyberArk Labs, but it's not been used in the wild in a big breach like SolarWinds before. So this is something we really need to be aware of now as defenders, because I think after all this attention and the success of this, this is going to be a more popular method, also maybe for other types of attackers, not only APTs, but also cyber criminals. Another technique that was described being used was modification or addition of so-called trusted domains in Azure Active Directory. And this actually establishes a backdoor for the threat actor into the Active Directory. What we also saw is a compromise of user accounts by credential theft. And this can maybe be used as a kind of fallback solution for persistence in case they lose access. They can just use these user accounts and log it back in again. The last technique described is that the threat actor were using hijacking existing Azure AD applications. And they were doing this by modifying or adding credentials either via the control panel in the browser or via PowerShell. And by doing this, they did not have to exfiltrate email. They could just log in and read the email inside in the browser. And this has also been reported to be part of the modus operandi of these threat actors. They were reading email, they're accessing users' calendars, and so on doing this technique. Okay, so just jumping a little bit, what did we do at Mnemonic for our customers when this incident broke out? So first of all, as soon as we got the first information, we published a threat advisory. We published this in the customer portal as well as on our blog, and we kept updating this threat advisory whenever the new information was available, which was over the Christmas holidays, of course. We also immediately started our threat hunting activities. We have a separate threat hunting team that does so-called indicator sweeps across all customers, where we search in all our sensors in all logs that we collect for customers and look for signs of activity that you can connect to this. And part of this is also looking into the available indicators and pivoting the indicators to come up with new indicators and then keep looking. So this includes both hypothesis-based and indicator-based threat hunting activity using historical data. And I want to mention that it's very important, as we learned also from this incident, to have logs that reach far enough back in time, because in this case, we got the information in December, but the incident actually took place in March, April. So we needed to look March, April, May, and then, the rest of the year. So we needed to look into passive DNS records, logs from pretty far back in time. So this is also something to take a note of. We also assisted our customers some of them had installed the Trojanized software to see if they had been further compromised. And as part of this, of course, we had to then look into these patterns or this DNS request queries and see if we found any sign of this stage 2 flag being activated. We have a product called Argus Continuous Vulnerability Monitoring that scans for vulnerable software components, vulnerable devices, and we very quickly added the affected SolarWinds Orion products to this list. So customers that subscribes to the vulnerability monitoring and had SolarWinds products would get alerted. We, of course, deploy signatures for detecting the URL patterns in our log analyzers and also in our endpoint responder service and in our Argus network analyzers. And we also have a centralized automated malware analysis service where we added our signatures to detect related or similar malware. So how does this impact the general threat landscape? So as I already mentioned, we expect to see other threat actors copying some of the described techniques for intrusion, for lateral movement, for persistence in cloud, specifically in cloud environments. And we also I expect to see that threat actors will continue to develop the tools and techniques so that they can abuse the supply chain, because this seems to be a very effective and, in this case, successful approach. And why should you be concerned? Why should I be concerned? So, as we all know, the pandemic, the shift to a largely remote workforce has led to a rapid increase in the adoption of cloud services. And we see a rising trend in security incidents where the attacker has gained unauthorized access through the abuse of user and administrative credentials. And so this trend has been growing somewhat steadily the last few years, and it's connected to the continued adoption of cloud services. And here's statistics from our latest annual report where we publish some statistics from the mnemonic SOC, or Security Operations Centers. And just to briefly explain this figure, the first data set is from 2017. This is the proportion, the percentage of incidents that have been handled by the SOC that were related to abusing identities. We see that in 2017 it was, and then the next one, 2018, was steadily growing a little bit. And then we have seen a great shift as the lockdown started and the remote workforce really started working from home. So we added the 3 first months of 2020 to the 2019 statistics to get the third column. And then we see the fourth, which is only related to incidents after March 2020, and it's really skyrocketed. It's up to 60%. So 61% of all the security incidents we've been working with are involving some type of account abuse. So this affects us all. And what are the lessons learned? First of all, it's super important to protect your credentials and your certificates. In order to protect against the golden SAML, in order for the threat actor to be successful with golden SAML, they need to have access to a privileged account. So protecting these privileged accounts is of the highest importance. Because you only need to have a local account, or you only need to have access to the ADFS account to be able to get those private keys, as I mentioned. And I mean, if those credentials are out there, then really, it's really hard to protect against this. So one way of doing this is to use some sort of privileged access management PAM solution, and also to be really look into how you're doing the separation of duties, that the same user is not doing like their domain admin things on the same account as other, not using the same account for everything. And also really be particular with logging and auditing high privileged AD accounts. So one thing we've seen is that the threat actor somehow gets hold of credentials on an on-premise, belonging to an on-premise AD. And then if the Azure AD is also inheriting the privilege of the on-premise, and the on-premise accounts get leaked, then the threat actor can access these accounts also directly by logging into the cloud solution later. So you need to look into how you are separating these privileges. And of course, risk assessment of vendors and tools in order to do something to protect against the supply chain attacks. You need to also, of course, do hardening, and look into access control, apply the least privilege concept everywhere, and also factor in a remote workforce. It doesn't look like we will be stopping working from home anytime soon. Even after the pandemic, I think a lot of people are shifted to, and also employers are shifted their mindset a bit when it comes to the remote workforce. And this gives challenges such as the suspicious traffic not necessarily being suspicious anymore. I mean, there's so many workers logging in remotely that their traffic sort of also looks suspicious, or it's not suspicious, but it looks suspicious according to maybe your old types of detection, like detecting that someone logs in using a particular type of VPN, for instance. This might be totally okay, might not be suspicious after you shifted to more people working from home. And also those things like impossible logins because of IP address, geo IP addresses and so on, becomes more challenging. So we have to focus on visibility. We have to look into the logging capacity and doing threat hunting activities. Assume breach and apply detection capabilities for this particular lateral movement that we see, in this case, from on-premise to cloud solutions. And also, of course, logging and auditing that cover both whatever happens in on-premise and the cloud signings as well. And of course, this all depends on how you set up your environment. To do a really good review audit of your configuration management and how you set up those logging and audit solutions is a good tip. And check your forensics and your incident response readiness in the cloud. So be prepared for handling incidents like this one, where there's a lot of activity happening in the cloud. And do you have the same visibility? Do you have a way of getting hold of the relevant logs? It's so much easier to check this beforehand, before you're in the middle of handling such an incident. So yeah, I want to set aside maybe 5 minutes for Q&A. So I think I'll stop here and just refer you to further reading. You can read more details on our threat advisory blog. You can also read more details related to the general threat landscape that we see in the stock statistics and so on in our newly published annual security report. So Q&A, have you got any questions for me?
We have. Thank you so much, Maria. This was really interesting. Thank you so much for all the work you put into this. There is a question from Andreas Fåfeng, and I'll read out the question. So, would or did multi-factor authentication play a role in how successful this exploitation could become?
So actually, multi-factor authentication plays a role when it comes to these password spraying attacks that I mentioned. What you need is to have a multi-factor authentication, of course, activated for all your remote logins, but also you need to be sure that you have deactivated all legacy authentication protocols, because we've seen in some cases that even though an organization has deployed MFA, it's still possible to bypass MFA in several by using some techniques where the threat actor abuses some legacy protocols that are also being used. So this is something to be aware of. But when it comes to the golden SAML attack and those more sophisticated techniques, those actually bypass the multi-factor authentication. What you could do is also be aware of which accounts that are registered with multi-factor authentication. Do some reviews to check that the threat actor hasn't added their own accounts with multi-factor authentication after getting their privileged access.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. There's a couple of more questions here. So Kai Palm, he's asking the question, is mnemonic cloud ready with respect to adversary in forensics and incident response readiness?
If mnemonic is ready. So we have more and more customers that are only using cloud services now. So yeah, we're getting more and more experience with cloud, and we have some really knowledgeable people when it comes to cloud, both setting up secure cloud solutions, auditing them, and also doing incident response and forensics. But yeah, this is certainly an area that we are focusing on. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Stian.
No, I think you're spot on. There's both here in the US and also in Europe, there's, like you say, companies being born in the cloud. They're not even talking about the good old-fashioned on-prem architecture. So we're definitely ready for cloud engagement. Whether that is making sure that we have the telemetry and visibility to be able to do 24/7 for our customers, or whether it is helping them along the journey towards the cloud. And so definitely, thanks for that question, Kai. We're ready. And then the last question, and thanks everyone for chipping in on these questions. We appreciate them. There's Eskil Rairemo. Will a recording of this webinar be posted on YouTube? For sure, it will. I've hit the record button, so hopefully if technology is with us, this will be recorded and put on our YouTube.
I can also maybe say that we have a lot of different webinars coming up, not only so the launch of the security report, we have a webinar series, and I think the next one is going to be on insider threats. And on this webinar series that will be also targeted towards US time zones. You have some plans for that, right, Stian?
Yes, absolutely. There is certainly a difference in time zones. So we're focusing on creating more webinars for the US time zone, and we are highlighting some of the good articles in that security reports and creating webinars from those. So absolutely. Stay tuned. You will all be invited, and thank you so much to you, Maria, and thanks to all the participants. This has been great. Have a good rest of your day, whatever time zone you're in. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you later. Bye.